Hi, Joanne.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. I'm Ricky Somal, and we're linked in on LinkedIn.
We are.
We're linked on social media. So it's great to see you again. We've had a great morning so far, and I think we're ready to start at 1 o'clock now as well. So I think I'll hand over to you, and really looking forward to your presentation.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ricky. I have sat in myself and observed this morning's proceedings, so I feel I'm in great company working with a lot of HR professionals who are already passionate around inclusion and belonging. And I think one of the things that Cheryl said earlier was when we talk about racial inclusion, how intersectional people of colour are. And again, the same applies to trans people. Trans people come from all walks of life. Trans people of colour, trans people with disability, neurodiverse, whatever it may be. So when we're thinking about designing systems and processes that work for all, trans people are all. We are everybody. So it's important to remember that by being inclusive and creating inclusive systems and structures, then trans people should also be included. But today I want to talk to you really about some of the things you may not have considered as HR professionals, putting a trans lens on something. Maybe we can talk about some stuff. I'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. And if you would like to pop stuff in the chat, I've got my chat open. I will have a look, but I won't be looking at it as I talk. I'll come back to it at the end, if that's okay. All right.
Great stuff. I'll mute and I'll take myself off camera and over.
So the objective that I want to talk about today is to create an understanding of the challenges that trans and gender diverse individuals have when engaging in employment or during the recruitment process, whether they're already transitioned, they're thinking about transitioning, they're transitioning at work, or maybe they're gender fluid or non-binary. All of these different aspects come into play depending on where somebody is in their life and how they feel about themselves. So let's talk about some of these things today. So the three key topics: do existing recruitment methods contribute to discrimination against trans and gender diverse individuals? What can and should be done by employers such as yourself to support individuals more effectively? And how much responsibility do you have as an organisation to improve cultural attitudes towards LGBTQ+, trans people in the workplace and in society in general? Because I'm a great believer that organisations have a responsibility for corporate allyship and to change the hearts and minds and influence policy in the society at large, not just inward looking. So I will start by this quote that I love. Well, I think I invented it, so of course I'm going to like it. So to me, inclusion is all about how you make me feel. How you make me feel by how you treat me. And you can expand that to how other people feel by how you treat them. And I'm sure we all want to feel included. And that inclusion for me is always a feeling. That sense of belonging, we talked about that earlier this morning, that sense of belonging that we create by having a culture that welcomes diversity of thought, diversity of mind, whatever it may be, and brings together that diverse thinking into a cohesive workforce, where the culture allows people to thrive at their best. So if you treat me like this, I will feel tolerated, excluded. If you treat me this way, I'm going to feel celebrated, I'm going to feel embraced. And that's where the magic happens, when we feel embraced and celebrated. I also say that the act of inclusion is holistic, active and deliberate. Again, it was said earlier that you shouldn't self-declare yourself as an ally. Allyship is about being active and deliberate about that allyship, picking the weight up of that carried by a marginalised community as if you're your own, not putting it down. When you have privilege, you have the luxury of dipping in and dipping out of your allyship. But true allyship is holding that weight, holding that strain all of the time. And it's not just about being an ally to an individual. It's about being an ally to a community. And when I talk about holistic, it's about all people. I don't think we can be a bit inclusive. Yeah, we can't be a bit of a virgin, a bit pregnant. So it's about being holistically and actively inclusive for all. So one thing I say as a trans person myself, I want to know if I can trust me, my psychological safety, my mental health. Can I trust me with you? What are you doing as an organisation to prove that I can trust you? At first contact, in the employer branding, employer marketing, when you're writing job descriptions, what does your website look like? Do I get that feeling that I'm going to be welcomed into your organisation? And I'm going to do my research. I'm an educated candidate. I'm going to do what everyone else is doing. Check out who you are, what you're about. So I need to know that I can trust you. Because if I don't think I can trust you, why would I apply? Why would I want to work for you? This is really, really important. And as you can probably imagine from the rhetoric going on in the media and society, trans people have a low level of trust of many organisations because we're aware of the discord that exists around trans identities. People can't see the slides. Can you see me? If you're having difficulties, you should be able to see me and my slides over my shoulder. That's how you should see me. So you want to pin me so I'm full screen and then maximise your window if you're having difficulty seeing me. Hope you can hear me okay as well. So the first thing is, can I trust my psychological safety and mental health with you as an organisation? And I think, well, would you employ someone like me? And that's easy to say. We're diverse, we're inclusive, we've got great ethics, we're HR professionals. And of course, we're an equal opportunity employer. We comply with the Equality Act, public service equality duty. We make all of these statements. But when it comes down to it, would you employ someone like me? And I've had this conversation. I've spoken at conferences all over the world, talk about trans inclusion. And people nod. They go, yeah, of course. But when it comes down to it, we know that trans people are less likely, disproportionately less likely, to be in employment than many other people. So let's look at the stats. 33% of organisations, when surveyed, said they wouldn't employ a trans or gender diverse individual. A third of employers that were publicly able to express that. I wonder how many people or other organisations out there declined, or they just gave the good answer. And then 84% of people don't see themselves as transphobic and don't agree with transphobia. And I go, but what about the other 16%? Out of 100 people in a room, 16 of those people statistically will have anti-trans views and rhetoric and discourse within their minds and actively oppose trans rights and trans inclusion. 16%. And of course, we could say that when we think about racism, Islamophobia, etc., there's always going to be a proportion of society that is negative. But as a trans person, I'm well aware that these people are mainstream. These people are your colleagues, your staff members. So there's 16% potentially in your organisation across the board are more than just trans neutral, they're trans negative. 40% supported the idea that a suitably qualified trans person definitely should be employed as a police officer, a primary school teacher. But what about in healthcare? But that's 60%, again, who are not definitely saying that trans people should be employed in these positions supporting members of the public. And that's healthcare professionals. I dare to say, if we'd asked the same question about healthcare professionals, what would that answer be? Maybe you know. But that's still shocking statistics. And this is the reality that we face in today's society. And then I ask, would the recruitment process, your recruitment process, discriminate against me? And it shouldn't, the process shouldn't. But we have to understand that trans people, gender diverse people, non-binary people, have nuances that may not apply to others. My identification may not align with my identity. My qualifications that I obtained at school, at university, or my professional registrations may not align with my visual and stated identity. My past employer, my references may not align with my current identity. And it's not incumbent upon every trans person to tidy up their entire past just for your benefit. So how can we accommodate this process within your recruitment methods so that when I prove to you my right to work, my employability, my references, my jobs, my CVs, or my history, how can I be sure that I can trust you with that information? Do I have to out myself to everybody? Or do you have, like the DBS have for disclosure bar checking, do you have a sensitive team? Can I be assured that only people who need to know this information see that information? It's not relevant to the hiring manager that I'm trans. It's not relevant to most of the team that I'm trans. But maybe it is relevant when you're doing that identity check, that ability to work, those qualifications. Do your application forms support all identities? Are they written with a trans lens? I see some shocking forms, and I often go on when I'm filling in information, when they're asking about sex or gender or sexuality. Clearly, they've not been reviewed with a trans lens. There's lots of othering, lots of unnecessary conflation of sexuality and gender identity, or simply misunderstanding that transgender is not a gender in itself. I want to tick the box that says female. And that's the box I will tick. If that's not the answer you're looking for, then you need to design the question in a different way. So think about the recruitment process. If you're doing telephone interviews, does my voice confuse you? Am I going to feel anxious about speaking to you over the phone? Are you going to misgender me inadvertently? Ask me if I'm Joanne several times before you believe me. So again, all this puts a burden onto my mental health and to my psychological safety around the trust that I have in your organisation. So I need to know that when I apply, I'm going to be given the same fair treatment as everybody else. I need to know that I can trust you not to misgender me, trust you to respect my privacy and not ask me invasive questions. And I'm sure, I'm absolutely positive as NHS professionals and HR professionals, I'm sure you have this belief, but it still goes wrong. I speak to many trans people in the trans population who constantly talk about discrimination, microaggressions, mental health impacts in the recruitment process. It goes wrong. So what's your plan B? How do you recover? How do you talk to me when you do make a mistake? Have you trained all the people in your organisation who come in contact during that process to be sensitive? So the reality is that trans people, 56% of trans people believe it's harder for them to find a job. And when you have those limiting beliefs, when you have that self-doubt, engaging in a process is always going to be harder. 53% think they experience barriers when progressing to more senior positions than non-trans people. Again, we see this with other minority groups, that it's easy to get onto the bottom rung. It's easy to be a worker, a minion, a colleague, but it's harder to rise because the typical people who have that privilege, that advantage in life, often succeed in a more smooth path. So how can we create equal opportunities? And 33% have experienced discrimination in job interviews and applications. I have. I know I have. People have told me. I've had recruitment agents tell me, look at me in the eye and say, it's going to be really tricky to place you, Joanne. I can only think of 2 or 3 companies in my entire portfolio that I could put you with. And that's recruitment professionals being honest with me, that as a trans person, it's harder to place me. I'm not the easy hire. So how can we change that? How can I put my trust into you and know that I can, the BS that we talk about of meritocracy, how do I know that I can compete on this level playing field? So should I feel anxious about coming out? Coming out, being open, expressing my true identity, my gender? Should I feel anxious? On the Friday afternoon, I'm a respected, valued member of the team. I make the announcement, and how do I get treated on the Monday? Am I getting funny looks? Am I getting conversations in the background? But the person I trust with this information, the first person I talk to, how are they going to treat me? How are they going to react? I'll walk into your office, say, hi, can I have a quick word? Got something important I want to share with you. I'm trans. And what happens at that moment? Is it a wow, that's amazing, Joe, great news, what can we do? Sit down, let's talk about this, how can I help? Or is it an OMG moment? OMG, what now? What do we do? We've not had anyone in our department, in our organisation, who's transitioned in this role before. Suddenly all the alarm bells are going. This person's a frontline service delivery person. How are the service users, how are the patients, how are people going to react? How are we going to integrate this person into the colleagues? We're thinking about uniforms, changing facilities. How's that going to work? All these things start going through your mind. I'm sat in front of you, and all I want to see is happiness. I want this to be frictionless. I want this to be no different to saying I'm pregnant. That's a tested result. We know what happens. Everyone's celebrating. We talk about baby showers. When's the baby due? It's all happiness. But I'm trans is often greeted with a confusion. Often treated with that rolling of the eye, that OMG. So what can you do as an organisation to ensure my experience from that very first millisecond of saying is positive and your body language embraces me and celebrates me? And why would I want to work for you anyway? Yeah, we know that often in the world of today, we know that resources are in demand. We know we've got challenges of hiring professionals and retaining professionals. So I have choice. I have choice in the market. And maybe if we talk about frontline clinicians, medical staff, they have choice. If we talk about back office, admin, people in the support network who are not maybe service user facing, they have choice as well. So why should I want to work for you? What are you telling me from your employer branding, from your job descriptions, from your website, from your Twitter feed? How do I know that I want to work for you? So I want to see queer people represented. I want to see queer people spoken about. I want to see queer people championed by your organisation. I want to know that the chief exec and the chair of the board all are behind trans inclusion. I want to see that. I want to see that oozing from when I investigate more about you. Because it's a moment, it's a bit of a seller's market. I have the privilege and luxury of being able to pick and choose who I want to work for. You want the best people, so how can you make sure that I feel you're the best employer for me? So think about that. Think about how you communicate that. Not just to trans, or gender diverse or queer people. Think about that, how you attract people across the board. So the reality that trans people face is that 32% have been bullied or insulted at work. 30% have had colleagues deliberately use the wrong pronouns. This is not accidental. This is not a slip up. This is not a casual microaggression. This is deliberately using the wrong pronouns. Repeatedly. 27% say they've been dead named. Their old name has been used. 24% feel they've been socially excluded. Suddenly, they may be identified male, and now they've transitioned or declared their intention to transition and identify as female. Are they being invited to the social activities of the other women? How are our non-binary colleagues treated? How are people who are fluid or queer? People are being socially excluded. We know that psychological safety, we know that good mental health comes from that feeling of inclusion, that feeling of belonging. And part of that work is being included in the social side as well, not just the work element. And 17% have also said they've been excluded from projects, from initiatives, considered too difficult. 12% have been told to use a different toilet or a separate toilet or the disabled toilet. Or the adequate provisions for toilets have not been provided. And I'm not saying that sounds like your organisation, but it's the reality about what can I trust me with you. 6% have said they've been physically abused or threatened. And we know that hate crime are often underreported. So that 6% could well be low. And again, I believe the NHS is an inclusive, powerful employer that has great social responsibility. But these statistics are across the board. So maybe it does exist. Maybe it doesn't exist in management. Maybe it doesn't exist at a senior level. Maybe this is the lived experience for more junior members. Maybe they're working in environments that aren't as progressive as others. So think about the stats, do your own research. But this is the reality that many trans people face. Even if it's not real in your organisation, it's the belief that we will have. So we talked about employee engagement, employee experiences, how we treat our employees. Are you counting and analysing the true experience of LGBTQ plus employees? And this is not just about filling surveys in. Yes, engagement surveys are great. Yes, getting the stats are great. But are we sitting down and talking to them? Asking about their lived experience? Asking about how it's working for them? I think by really engaging and having conversations beyond form filling is extremely insightful. Engaging with ERG staff networks. And I know that you have within the NHS some really great staff networks, some great lived experience of people and resources to call on. And I'm not saying you're not doing this, but really need to talk to people. If you're trying to find out how to fix, how to enhance, how to make lives better, we know it's about talking, having conversations. So think about the trans people. Think about your non-binary people. Think about your fluid people. Think about their lived experience working for you. How do they feel? Do they feel included? So the challenges. Got a few more minutes here. We've got the challenges to think about. The societal pressures. You will know that the government looked at a Gender Recognition Act reform in 2018 under Theresa May government. And we know that that got shelved, got archived by the Johnson government. But that stirred up a hornet's nest of gender critical rhetoric and anti-trans rhetoric. Leading figures, the J.K. Rowling, the Paula Radcliffes, and very many other celebrities became very vocal and started this narrative. We've now got the Lgbt Alliance, we've got Women's Place UK, we've got a whole load of other charities that have been created to lobby against trans rights. So the world we live in 2021, we know that this is going on. This onslaught is going on. So this is how trans people's mental health is being affected. So as an organisation, as an employer, it's recognising that this is the social pressure that people are facing. The pressure that they know that 16% of the people around them are potentially anti-trans. Their colleague may also be anti-trans. And there's also this belief, thinking about your organisation specifically, that the NHS should be people experts. We come to the NHS as the source and the solution to my ailments, to my mental health, to all my problems. And I know from my own experience that the variability I've experienced from the NHS in inpatient, outpatient, primary, GP, and nursing, etc., etc., I know that I've had a variable experience. I've had some fantastic support from my GP, but I've had some really marginal experiences when I was admitted for various operations over the last 2 or 3 years. So I want to know that you're experts. I want to know that when I talk and engage with the frontline staff, the people I come in contact with as a patient, as a service user, I want to know that you have my identity as something you understand. I don't want to be playing Russian roulette or poker with, am I going to get a good doctor, a bad doctor, a good nurse or a bad nurse? You should be the experts on me. And I appreciate that's not the reality. I can't expect that you become an expert on everything. But as a patient, that's what I want. That's my patient experience. I want you to care about me. I don't want to have to run to pals. I don't want to have to run to make complaints every time. I just want my toenails cut by a chiropodist. I just want that service. I don't want to have be misgendered and feel that whole psychological impact just for having a minor conversation. Let's think about, I mentioned the fact that the 16%, I don't want to keep labouring on, but colleague to colleague, you're working with people all the time. Is that knowledge there? Are you providing training around gender diverse identities? Are people really there to support? And we think about a trans journey, the pre-transition, when people transition, when they become out and open about their identity. People who are non-binary or fluid who never fully or never do any transitional process, maybe just changing their pronouns or changing the way they appear. So there's obligation sometimes to conform to stereotypes, the binary rules we have around masculinity and femininity, about how we dress, how we perform. So how are we supporting colleague to colleague? And then how do colleagues, how do your clinical staff, the people I come in contact with, the admin people, how do they treat me as a service user? Do they understand me? And of course, then we've got a service user to colleague. Me as a trans person coming in, dealing with one of your people, maybe your member of staff, maybe the person I come in contact with is themselves trans or gender diverse, non-binary. What support do they get if I'm abusive as a service user? I know you have a duty of candour, you default to apologise. Are you thinking about the impact of the member of staff who's trans when they get abuse, when they get hate crime from a service user? We wouldn't tolerate it when people are racist, homophobic, whatever it is. Why do we tolerate transphobia? These are the challenges that I know you face and I know I face as a human being, as a patient, as a service user. So it's about having these things thought about. And when we think about transitioning at work, is that process test driven? Have you thought about the steps? Go from an OMG moment to a tried and tested way of thinking, way of working. And I'm not saying you should have a prescriptive checklist. Nobody wants to be on a checklist. But have a conversational flow of working out how you have those conversations so that the person you're dealing with is at the centre of those conversations. You're not telling them or dictating to them about their identity, the timescales, how they need to behave. You're asking them how they would like to be treated so they can feel included, they can feel belonging and part of the organisation. So some ideas. That'll give us 15 minutes for Q&A if you wish. Integrate it into your culture. Trans inclusion is holistic. We can't be a bit inclusive, a bit pregnant or a bit of a virgin. Integrate it into the culture. We talked earlier about getting senior champions and sponsors. Part of the ERG, being very vocal and being a corporate ally. Standing firm, standing strong, not just in Pride Month, not just in those hashtag days, but all year round, so that people from the outside can see what you stand for. What is your position on what you see in the media? What is your position on the anti-trans rhetoric you see? What support can I expect from my employer when I see that in the paper? So I've been looking for you as an organisation to put out statements, be public about it. Maybe that's tricky as a public body. Maybe you have limits to what you can do. But by being more than just performative and flying a rainbow, there's more you can do there. So I say that inclusion is non-negotiable. I want to feel included, you want to feel included, we all want to feel that inclusion. You've probably come across freedom principles: fairness, respect, equality, dignity and autonomy. That's the minimum human right that I expect as an individual, regardless of the fact I'm trans. I want to go into your organisation, I want to see visible signposting. I want to see the support that I can get. Mental health, maybe stonewall posters, maybe signposting to ERGs, staff members, colleagues who can help me. I want to see that I feel included when I walked in. The You Said We Did, all of that stuff that you're well known for. The big boards on the way into wards. I want to see this stuff as a patient. I'm sure as colleagues, you want to see this visible support. And yes, invest in trans awareness training if you're not doing it already. I know that I work with a number of NHS trusts, CCGs, primary care, etc., and I'm still providing training. So that means there's still a knowledge gap. There's still a huge knowledge gap. Certainly in GPs, certainly when we're talking about admin staff, there's a huge gap there. We've got to get to a point where this is the basics. This is 101 in your ED&I strategy. Because trans people, whether we like it or not, are still one of the most marginalised and abused categories of people under the Equality Act 2010. Simple things like normalising pronoun sharing on email signatures, on your Zoom account. How many people have got a Zoom account? Can you share your pronouns in your teams and whatever you do? You notice at the very beginning, I put Joanne, Lockwood, she, her, as part of my intro slide. Almost make it part of your signature everywhere, not just your email, on slides, on presentations, on reports. Get normalising so that people know that you're a safe space. So think about your takeaways from the session today. I'm not going to ask you specifically, but think about what you can do now. If you think about ACT as an acronym, ACT, action changes things. If you found this interesting, you found this informative, if you do nothing with it, nothing will change. If you believe that change should occur, what can you do now? What can you do tomorrow? What can you do next month? How can you step forward and be an active, holistic ally for trans and gender diverse individuals? Thank you very much. I'm happy to turn that over to anybody, or I'll go through the questions that you may be posted in the chat. So let me have a look, see what we got. Right. So I've got a question here. Sarah Holmes says, I'm sure this will be a reality for trans people working in the frontline services, such as paramedics and A&E. Sarah, do you want to expand on that? Obviously, that was in context when I was speaking, but yeah, it is a reality. I hear of stories where trans nurses have been turned away by patients. I'm sure that a trans paramedic entering someone's house may create a reaction. So yeah, how do you handle that? I'm not standing here giving you the answer or telling you what the answer is, but we need to have a conversation. How do you handle that?
So thank you for today, Joanne. So I was just concurring really with what you were saying about trans people being subject to verbal and physical abuse when you were talking about the 6% previously. And you'd sort of mentioned, you know, perhaps this doesn't necessarily happen in the NHS, but it's certainly happening out there for people. Now, whilst I've not heard about it so much in relation to trans people, and that's probably because the number of trans people that we employ is statistically probably very small, I do know that it happens to people of colour, for example, and it's the same situation as you've just described, where someone says, I don't want to be treated by that person. Or if you think about people that are sort of first responders, some of the situations they're dealing with are already very volatile, and if you're dealing with that sort of person, you're the easy target, I think, for abuse
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm not trying to conflate different characteristics. And if someone came in and said, "I don't want to be treated by that doctor or that nurse because of that person's faith or ethnicity," you would say, "Well, hang on a minute. If you want treatment, this is the person that's going to treat you." But what seems to happen often is that there's a right to reject a trans person, a right not to support that person. And I don't work for the NHS. I don't know what your particular policies are or how that would work clinically. But I believe that is what would occur. I mean, I've been kicked out of a female ward, and wheeled down the corridor and told that that's a woman. That ward's for women. And I said, "Well, I am." They said, "Well," and put me in a private ward, which is fine. But they could have phrased that entirely differently by saying, "Oh, Joanne, we're just going to wheel into a private ward because we think you'll get better treatment there." And I go, "Cool, private ward, fantastic, thank you very much." But the fact they brought my gender identity into that, immediately I'm feeling tense, angry. All I want is my gallbladder removed. I don't want to have a conversation about my gender at that point. So, and I know people who've been recovering from heart attacks, being wheeled into male wards, having their male name written everywhere, having the doctors calling them sir. This is within the last 18 months, and before. So I know it occurs, and I hear the horror stories. So it's around that educational piece.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else got any thoughts? So Jessica said she's going to go away and put some thoughts together. Yeah, you got LGBT networks. You have staff networks where you can raise these. If you haven't within your organisation, there's a network. I think on Twitter I know of an LGBT NHS network, and you'll probably find that in your internal channels on Teams or whatever you use, there'll be internal LGBT networks you can call on. You don't need to be parochial within your own trust or within your own locale. Spread the knowledge. I'm doing work with West Sussex dementia and Alzheimer's at the moment. And there's a huge concern of mine is LGBTQ plus trans care in social care with dementia, with Alzheimer's. And that whole aspect is emerging as a challenge. So again, I'm very passionate about being involved in these kind of projects. Yeah, comment here from Stuart about application forms and forms you use. I'm well aware of it. I'm doing some work with one of my local NHS trusts, Solent NHS, around redesigning the questions that LGBT people get asked at first contact or whatever that may be. And we're looking at how we do that from a more of a sexual orientation point of view rather than a gender identity point of view. But I'm sure there's nothing to stop you as a trust, you as an organisation, thinking about how you collect data and those questions that you ask. Jean says they remain uncomfortable by the expectation to declare pronouns. I agree. I don't agree that there should be an expectation to declare pronouns. What I would like to see is people seeing the self-declaration of pronouns as being an indication of allyship. And I actually say to people, I don't want you to put your pronouns on your signatures unless you understand the significance of that to me and to other trans or gender diverse individuals. Because I think it's almost like an allyship flag. It's like you walk past a cafe, you see a rainbow on the window, you walk past a pub, you see a flag outside. That says to me, that's a safe space. When I see you're sharing pronouns, I see that as meaning you're a safe space. I know you've thought about it, why it matters to share your pronouns, and that by doing so, you accept the responsibility for being an ally. So if you feel it's an onerous thing, if you feel it's an expectation, you feel it's a burden, you don't want to do it, please don't. I will then know that you're not ready, you're not embracing the responsibility that comes with sharing pronouns. Can you have my email? Yes, sure. What I've given the organisers a copy of the slide deck, and it has all of my contact details on this slide here. You can also scan the QR code for my LinkedIn profile if you wish as well. Jean has said that I'm not on camera, but I could see my smiley face as a response to your answer. Thank you. Hopefully that answered it for other people. But yeah, pronouns, please share them. if you understand why, but don't feel pressure. I didn't share my pronouns for a while as a trans person, because to me, I felt, well, hang on a minute. I'm a woman. I dress as a woman. Can't you figure out I'm a woman? Then I realised it wasn't about me. It wasn't about me. It was about what I communicated to others. And now, as you see on my slides, I make sure I put them wherever I can. It's almost part of my, instead of saying PhD after me, I now give my pronouns. Oh, and in case you're wondering, I used to look like my emoji, but I've just had a hair transplant. So I'm hoping in a couple of years' time, my hair will grow back. So thank you for enjoying the soul singer look that I'm embracing at the moment. So I think we're into the last couple of minutes. Are there any questions? I mean, if you want to just unmute and go for it, I'm happy with that. Don't need to put your cameras on. Stuart says their pronouns are on the nameplate in their office, meaning anyone passing knows it's a safe space. It's great, fantastic. And I think that's a small thing you can do, so great. Cheryl, thank you for your feedback there. Brilliant, appreciate that.
Joanne,
yeah,
you did invite. Could I just say thank you for explaining the thing about pronouns, because I didn't really get it. I'm of an age where's this all come from? What does this all mean? And that's the first time somebody's coherently and cogently explained to me why I would do that. And actually, I will do that now, because I do think of myself as a safe space for people. I hadn't realised that's what it was about. So thank you for that.
That's my interpretation. My opinion. As with any opinion, other people have different ones, but that would be my interpretation, and that's the interpretation I like to share with people. So I'm really pleased that that resonates with you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Joanne, can I just mention something? I don't know if you can hear me. First of all, I'd just like to thank you. That's fantastic presentation. And another thing I do share my pronouns anyway, and we made it sort of symbol in our hospital so everybody use it, you know. And another thing I just want to mention is I think there's a huge gap in the BME community regarding what transgender means, what how to be an ally and so on. And hopefully we can take all this education and capacity within the BME community to understand, because I come across lots of BME people who are trans and that they got no clue who they are, you know, and how to identify themselves. So hopefully one day we can take all this education to the BME community so they can be more recognized and understand what they're going through. So certainly I come across so many cases, it was the case. However, I just want to say that, again, thank you. And I'm just leading on the LGBTQ plus NHS network within my organization. And hopefully what I learned today, I can take it to them and then we can do some proactive work within the organization. So thank you.
Yeah, and just picking up on what you're saying there about BME, whatever your chosen acronym is, or non-white people, I recognise that it can be a tough experience being trans as a white person, but I also recognise that it is a tougher experience when you think about intersectionality, when we think about people from different faith groups. And we know there's lots more stigma around being gay, being lesbian, around certain faith groups, certain ethnicities. So yes, it is incredibly more a magnitude, more impactful, maybe being a trans person of colour, also being a trans person with a disability. In the same way, there's this myth that disabled people can't be gay. There's also this myth that disabled people aren't trans. So again, when we think about all the other protected characteristics, or just the variance of people, trans people come from all walks of life, and as an able-bodied, I say middle-aged, I'm probably a bit old to be called middle-aged these days, but I'd like to think I've got another 50 years in me, so let's stick for that. I know I have privilege through my ethnicity, so I know I have that privilege, and I know that many others don't. So we should recognise that other communities are more impacted, and I think in the same way with Cheryl talking earlier, and the panel that Ricky was hosting around what can we do to be more anti-racist, how can we raise this? Let's put a trans lens in there as well, or an LGBT lens in that as well. Yeah, as I say, without turning this into a sales pitch, I do work with NHS trusts, dementia, Alzheimer's. Sometimes I volunteer, sometimes I charge. I have to earn a living. But if anyone's looking for me to have a chat, have a coffee, I'm always open to having a coffee over Zoom, having a chat. So it's not cheeky. Just drop me an email, drop me a LinkedIn message and say, Joe, can I just ask you a few questions? Absolutely happy. One of the reasons I'm here today is to help you on your journey as HR professionals. Okay, well, that's 13:45. I believe that's the end of my slot. I think we're going back to the main breakout or the main room at around 10:02 for the closing words by the chair. So thank you. Grab a quick coffee, whatever you may do. And you've got 4 or 5 minutes. Okay? So thank you very much. Please make contact. Thank you. Cheers.